I suppose in the late 60s, when I was a teenager, you didn't know about things. Everything was very secret. I mean, up until 67 it was illegal. And then, even then, it was only legal between two consenting adults in private. And the police had a wonderful way of deciding what was in private. If there was somebody else in the house, they could charge you. In a hotel, they could charge you. So it was still, difficult, but more and more underground places were sort of building up.
It was the devil's game, first of all, to find out if there was anywhere to go, because there was no internet or whatever. Sounds like it's going back to the Ark, doesn't it? I'm not that old. We are going back to the mid-80s. So you couldn't find anywhere to go. And then we heard of a club. It was down a side street. And then we had to go into what would have been like an old courtyard where they took the horses into the back. And then at the back of the courtyard, there was some black metal steps, like fire escape steps, which you had to go up. And then there was a black door, I kid you not, with a peephole in it. And a slide thing that went over the hole. And you knocked at the door, and this piece of whatever it was slid to the side, and somebody looked through, and you had to say, can we come in? And it burly bloke opens the door, and you go in, and inside was a nightclub.
I remember when I was about 17, 18, it was the time of the skinheads. And they loved nothing better than to go out queer bashing. And you really had to be very careful, otherwise you could get a very serious beating from them.
I came out about a year or so before legalisation, when I was 20, so 65, so a couple of years I suppose. And when I came to Wolverhampton, I wasn't out to the general population, as it were. I was teaching, and so I probably thought it was better not to be too open to anybody and everybody.
In those days, it was a matter of being yourselves with your friends and not lying or hiding anything, but never actually saying the words, we are lesbians, or we are a couple, or partner. We left everything to everybody to draw their own, whatever they wanted to draw from it. So we never came out, but we never hid in a closet either.
It was difficult to find out information about being trans. I didn't even know the words to ask, who to ask, what, if any, things were available, because at the time that I'm talking about, the attitude of doctors was that they would put you right with electric shock therapy rather than any other sort of help to achieve what you desired.
You're talking about the 60s when nothing was said about anything anyway. I mean, our only sex education at school was a film about VD. And they said, A meets B and B meets C, and it passes on. And since at the time we showed this film, I had no idea what A and B were doing together in the first place. It was kind of pointless. So obviously I knew that homosexuality existed, but it was just sort of a fact rather than a sort of anything personal, and that you couldn't call your best friend Les because of what it meant.
I think in the 70s, and also to a degree in the 80s as well, in the early part of the 80s, it was still very stereotypical, because the gay men that were openly gay were still quite stereotypically effeminate. And there was a lot of assumption made about certain females at the time, certain particularly like singers and entertainers, because of their appearance. And a lot of the words that were used at the time now would quite possibly be considered to be offensive, and you know, they would be splashed across the front of a newspaper. Even going back into the 60s, it was, you know, terminology that we would not use now was quite freely used about gay men and about gay women.
Well, in terms of work, I certainly once lost a job because I got arrested on a cruising charge. That led to me being sacked and led to me being virtually kind of blacklisted by employers, which is how I ended up back in Wolverhampton, because I was living in Scotland, but I could not get a job in Scotland. And that's because that was because of, you know, certain police officers at Partick Police Station in Glasgow decided that they would choose to spend, they thought the way that what they were employed to do was to hang around in Kelvin Grove Park and catch gay men having sex with one another. And you know, and that was in 1990.
It wasn't easy, even after 1967. You know, when I was 21. If my landlord knew I was gay, I probably wouldn't get the flat. There was still a lot of prejudice. It's only really in recent years that it's become more acceptable in society, and there are still, and there always will be, facets of society that don't like it.